This is occasionally insightful, not always insightful. So sometimes we smart, sometimes we intellectual, and sometimes we all just stupid. Welcome to another episode of Occasionally Insightful. I'm your host, Elisa, and today I wanted to talk about some things that have happened to me lately. It's been a few days since I recorded the last episode of the pod, and before that I was kind of recording episodes back to back to back so that I had a few to launch with and so that I had a little bit of a buffer, because I'm paranoid that I'll miss a week and I won't have time, and then I won't have an episode for the week. So this is the first episode that I'm recording since the channel officially launched. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been listening to the episode so far. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. Thank you to everyone who's followed me on Twitter or sent me an email. Actually, I don't think anyone sent me an email at this point in time whilst I'm recording, but maybe by the time this episode airs, there will have been something. So just thank you to everyone for all the support that you've given me. It's much appreciated. Thank you for deciding that my voice is tolerable enough to listen to for a couple of hours. By the way, as I was editing, I'm gonna get into everything in a second, but okay, what I did was I recorded the first 5 episodes of the podcast, and first 5 plus the intro, I suppose. I recorded the first 5 episodes of the podcast, and I just recorded them all. I didn't do any editing, so I only started editing after I had recorded episode 5. And I realized a few things. Firstly, I apologize if the audio is a bit wonky here and there. I tried to fix it as best I can in post-production, but put it this way, I don't exactly have the best post-production skills. So, I followed some tutorials. I did my best, so hopefully it's listenable, but I know that there are certain times where, like, my voice sounds further away because I'm further away from the mic, so I will try to be more conscious of it going forward. But, you guys, when I talk and when I get into a story, I get animated and things just happen. So I'm going to do my best to be a better podcaster, but it's a learning process. And with time, inshallah, things will be better. Also, I'm not necessarily recording on the highest quality equipment. And I don't think you necessarily need the highest quality equipment to make a stellar podcast. But this is someone with not much experience, aka no experience, someone with not much experience working with not that great equipment, who doesn't really know how post-production works. It's kind of not exactly a recipe for failure, but it's not a recipe for success either. So, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for your patience. If anybody has any tips, it is much appreciated. But, we're just working with what we got. I think I said it in episode 1. I'm not sure. But, or maybe I didn't. I'm a believer that if you want to do something, just do it. And, there is that saying, it is better to half-ass something than to not do anything at all. Which is to say, I feel that some of us, myself included, feel afraid, or we don't want to take a chance and do something if we know that we're not gonna do that thing we're not going to be the best at that thing. We're scared to try something new. We're scared to break out of our comfort zone. We're scared to be adventurous because we're scared of failure, basically. And we're scared of not being the best. But, and that fear that pressure to perform, that those expectations that you place on yourself, they're holding you back. And so if you want to do something, just do it. Even if the first few tries aren't that great, just do it and keep on doing it and keep persevering. Don't let yourself get discouraged. And then eventually you end up doing the thing that you want to do. I was going to say eventually you'll become good at it, but I think that is also problematic, this expectation that if you keep persevering, you'll get good. And more so just the idea that the end goal is to get good, right? Like sometimes you can be not that good at something, but still enjoy doing it. You can be not the best swimmer and still enjoy swimming. You can be not the best runner and still enjoy running. You can be not the best baker and still enjoy baking. I don't think the goal has to always be getting good or getting better at something and becoming like pro level skills. I think just doing something that you enjoy in and of itself is admirable. How did I get on this tangent? I forget. There was a train of thought that I was trying to follow. But basically, I'm trying to say is like, oh yes, I was talking about podcasting. I would like to get my workflow down, sorted, and, really hone in on how to edit and how to edit well and how to make sure that the actual recording sounds good. But at the end of the day, this is just something that I want to do for fun. This is just something that I want to do for myself, and it's a nice outlet for me to just talk and be myself and just kind of live out my dreams of being an influencer. So yeah, at the end of the day, that's what matters for me. That being said, oh yes, I know what I was going to say also. I was going to say, like, as I was editing, besides the slightly janky audio issues, I also realized how slow I talk sometimes, and how many ums I say. Okay. I need, that was something that, when I was preparing for my Cambridge interview, when you pick up on it, you become hyper aware of it, and every time you do it, you're like mentally criticizing yourself. You're like, don't say the don't say the see? But it's so hard to be silent. You know what? This is who I am. I'm going to embrace it. This is who I am. I'm going to embrace it. But when I was preparing for my Cambridge interview, one of the things we did was obviously interview practice. And the teacher who was coaching us would encouraged us to film ourselves, like giving each other interviews. So working in partners, working in pairs, we would film ourselves, and then you have that recording to watch back, and watching yourself being interviewed and watching yourself respond to questions, and you pick up on all your little tics, like the way you play with your hair, or the way you fidget with your fingers, or the way you fidget with the cuff of your sleeve, or the little verbal tics that you have, the ums and the ahs and the like, and the one thing that he pointed out that I do, and I still do to this day, is someone asks me a question, and I begin my responses with, okay, so, because to me, that's like mentally, I'm jumping into the answer. That's how I gear myself up to respond. Like if I'm confident, that is my tick. If I know how to respond, if I feel confident in my answer, or, if I want to attack it in a particular way, or I have a sense of direction with the answer, I open with, okay, so yeah, it's interesting. it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are certain tics and verbal habits, or even physical tics and habits, that can annoy your conversation partner. So if my ums and ahs and random stutters when I think, like, you know, just now, I do that thing where it to me, the best way I can explain it is like my brain is revving up as it processes an answer. When I go like, so, yeah, or, you know, whenever I say a word multiple times like that, or but, I do that too. I notice I do that too. It's mentally in my head, my brain is like revving up to answer the question, or to continue the train of thought, or to elaborate further. Usually that is a sign that I'm processing my thought and I'm trying to, I don't want to say intellectualize it, but sort of take the basic thought and evolve it into something more clever and more eloquent and more intelligent sounding. Not because I'm pretentious, but because I know, like, I have the general idea of what I want to say, but I know that there's a better way and a more impactful way to say it. So when I do that revving up thing, it's because my brain is frantically trying to piece together a sentence that is coherent, or an explanation that is coherent. And it, you know, it's interesting how your brain, or rather your mouth, unconsciously makes sounds as you think, and how you make different sounds when you're thinking in different ways. A lot of us, I'm sure, make, like, all of us and ah and but it's interesting to reflect and see in what contexts you make different noises. Yeah. So I keep getting sidetracked from my main point. So audio issues. Besides, okay, when I listened back, when I was editing the podcast, besides the audio issues, besides the verbal tics, I also realized that I talk slow-ish. Well, I always thought that I talked fast, but I think that's just something that I have in my head. I know I can talk fast, and I can talk extremely fast when I'm giving a presentation. Like, if you tell me I have 2 minutes to go through 10 slides, I will make those 2 minutes count, and I will go through all 10 slides, and I will give you so much detail. You will feel like, wow, I just went around the world and back twice in 2 minutes. Sometimes that's how it feels like. Like, I know I can talk fast, and I know I can be very pointed and very sharp and very direct with, very intentional with my words. But this podcast is not that. Well, sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's very rambly, and I'm taking a walk through a field of flowers, and you know, it's that imagine a stock video footage of a woman with her hand out as she walks through a meadow, and her fingers are catching on the leaves and the flowers. Okay, yeah. That's the sort of visual image of my brain as I am wandering through this podcast. You get me? Like, it's leisurely, it's casual, it's chill. So as I was listening, I was like, my God, I am so slow. How does anyone tolerate me? How does anyone listen to me? So, pro tip, just watch the pod on like 1.75 or 2 speed or something, like at least 1.5 speed, just so that you actually listen to me getting to the points faster. And I think that I personally find that listening to people talk faster is more pleasant, because when they're slow, I just get frustrated. I'm like, dude, just get to the point. Dude, I don't, just get to the point. Like, the pauses, man, just get to the point. And I think I'm allowed to say this because I'm criticizing myself. So, like, you know, if you need to watch the pod on 2 speed, do it. Do it. I get you. If I was listening to myself, And when I was editing myself, I was listening to myself on like 1.8, 1.9 speed just to get through things faster. Mainly to speed up the process of editing, but also because I'm like, I take too many pauses when I think. But I can't help it because, for the most part, this pod is unscripted. I have an outline of things I want to talk about, but I don't like word for word come up with a script that I read from, because I think that makes it inauthentic. And maybe that's for certain instances, certain podcasts, depending on the style, depending on the vibe you're going for, like full on script is useful and is in fact necessary. But this is occasionally insightful, not always insightful. So sometimes we smart, sometimes we intellectual, and sometimes we all just stupid. So, that's how it be. And this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to, sit down and talk since launching the channel. And in fact, when I record this, I only launched the channel 12 hours ago. I launched it on, for me, Monday night, 26th of April. So not much has happened. But like I said, thank you to everyone who's watched, and thank you to everyone who's listened to the episodes and left your support. It's really meant a lot. Apologies for the couple of pre-recorded videos, episodes 4 and 5. But like I said, I was just trying to give myself a bit of a buffer. And I think by the time I post this episode, it'll be Eid, or it will be after Eid, because I think this is going out on the 17th of May, if I'm not mistaken. So to everyone who is celebrating or was celebrating over the weekend, I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope you were safe. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as possible in these COVID times. Hopefully you got to catch up with family or friends, and hopefully you got to enjoy some nice food. We'll get to the topic of food in a minute, actually, because I have exciting news to share. But yeah, Selamat Hari Raya, Eid Mubarak, and I don't know what else to say because it's currently halfway through fasting month for me, so Eid still feels like a way off. But in the topic of Ramadan and Muslim things, I paid my zakat for the first time today, because it's the first time I've had an income, right? So it's the first time I've had a reason to pay my zakat. And I felt very adult doing it. I don't know if anyone else goes through this, or if anyone else has had this experience or these feelings. But the first time I do anything that I have typically associated with adult life, I'm like, damn, I'm an adult now. Don't talk to me. I'm an adult now. The first time, I remember back in uni, the first time I was paying my own bills, and now the first time that I'm paying zakat, I was like, wow. I'm an adult. I have to be responsible. I have to actually think about these things. I do the things that my parents do. Wow, I'm an adult. I'm it's just so weird to be sometimes I genuinely forget that I'm a 20-something-year-old. Sometimes I feel like I'm a 19-year-old clueless kid. No. I'm turning 23 this year. I'm not just 20. I'm in my 20s. It's so wild to think that, I don't know. I think part of the reason is that I'm not super independent at this point in time. I still in a lot of ways consider myself a dependent, especially at this moment in time, because I don't have a job. That's a long story that we're not going to get into right now, but at this moment in time I'm unemployed. So I'm very much a dependent on my parents, and I still live with them. I don't drive. That is again another story. So I depend on them, or I depend on Grab or public transport, whatever, to get around. The most independent that I was, I feel like that wasn't proper English. I was most independent whilst I was at university. But even then, I feel that the type of independence you experience is in Cambridge is different to the type of independence you experience going to other universities, because at Cambridge, most students at least are still living in college. So your landlord is college. And so the experience of dealing with college as a landlord is very different to, I'm sure, like having to go and find somewhere to rent and somewhere to live. And, I feel like housing and accommodation is one of the big priorities of life. Like having somewhere to stay is important. Why can't I speak today? Having somewhere to stay and having a roof over your head is important. But when that roof is more or less guaranteed to you through your college, like, it kind of takes away the need to be a responsible, independent adult. So yeah, I was independent, quote unquote, but I still feel like I'm a clueless 20-something-year-old, like, it was convenient not having to worry about accommodation, but at the same time, I don't think it really prepared me for life in the real world. So, it has its pros and cons, that system. It has its pros and cons. I don't think that I would change it, but I also recognize that I have shortcomings in my knowledge of how adulting life is. And that's that on that. Yeah. So, oh yes, one more thing that I wanted to say about the pod before we move on to other more interesting topics. I promise we're not going to talk about the podcast in this podcast. Like, no, that wasn't English either. We're not just going to spend this whole episode talking about this podcast, because that would be very meta, and I don't think we're quite at that level yet. Like, we have to have a few more episodes before we can have a meta talk about the podcast. But anyway, one more thing I wanted to say was, if the ending of the last few episodes sounded weird and sounded sort of weirdly cut together and a little bit choppy, it's because they were. So here's the story. Originally, the plan was for me to launch this podcast, and I was going to post it on YouTube, but I was also going to publish it on this site called Anchor. And Anchor is owned by Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. But Anchor is a service that allows you to host your podcast, and they take on the job of distributing your podcast to the major platforms. So to Apple Podcasts, to Google Podcasts, to Spotify, to wherever else, right? So, and it's completely free. That's the thing that got me interested. I was like, oh, Anchor is actually completely free. So yeah, you just create an account and you upload your podcast, and then they take on the responsibility of distributing it. There are other sites that do a similar purpose, but, or that perform a similar function, but those other sites are paid. And the thing is, although I want to get into podcasting long term, and I want this to last for more than 10 or 20 episodes. Like, I want this to be something that I do for years. Like, I want this to become just a part of my life. So although I want that for myself, I'm not sure that I will commit to it. I'm not sure. Like, I know myself, and I know that I don't always have the self-motivation and self-drive to keep something like this going. So I want to see if I want to see how serious I am about it, once I've gotten over the initial phase of excitement. Like, now the podcast is actually launched and episodes are being released every week. Can I maintain this long term? Is it a sustainable addition to my life? Can I make it fit within my day-to-day, week-to-week needs? Right? So only once I figured that out, will I consider and really look into hosting it on other podcasting sites and distributing it to the other major podcasting platforms. Because right now, I don't want to make an investment. I mean, it doesn't necessarily cost a lot. I'm not willing to fork up that money when I'm not sure if it's going to be money well spent. You get what I'm saying? So right now, this is kind of like a trial period for myself. Free 30-day trial. It's going to be more than 30 days, probably. It's more like free 30 episode trial or something. But yeah, we're going to see how it goes. So the reason why I decided to not host it on Anchor in the end was, so I came across the site and I looked up I was a little bit suspicious initially. I'm like, free? And they distribute everything for you? So why are other platforms making you pay? Like, what's the catch? So, I did a little bit of research into it and it was like, no, you still maintain creative control over your content. The podcast is still yours. They just take on the responsibility of distributing. And I was like, okay, I guess this is how we're going to do it. But then literally like a day or two before I was going to launch the pod, like on Saturday or Sunday. I launched it on Monday. So on the Saturday or Saturday before, I was going to launch on Monday. So in the 1 or 2 days before that, over the weekend, I did a little bit more research. And that's when I discovered like all the slightly questionable things. Like, yeah, it's free, but they're probably going to make you pay later down the line. Like they're going to monetize it at some point, probably. Plus, they have the distribution rights, basically. Don't quote me on this because I don't fully understand it myself. But I think they being Anchor holds the distribution rights over your podcast. And so if you want to later take back those distribution rights and so that you have control over the license or the ability to host your podcast, to share your podcasts on Apple Podcasts, for example, like it's hard to get the rights back from Anchor and it's hard to take back control. So, signing over that control so early feels risky. And the thing is like I said just now, like I don't fully understand their system or what they do. Like I don't understand exactly how they operate and why it's free and what the risks are involved. Like it feels too good to be true. That's one. And second, I didn't fully understand the platform process system. So those two things combined was a major red flag to me. And I was like, okay, I'm just not going to host on Anchor. I'm just going to stay away from it and just be safe. And just, maybe sometime down the line we'll revisit. But for now, no bueno. Because that's the thing. Like, if you don't understand something and also that something seems too good to be true, stay away. Stay away no matter what it is. Like, if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And if you don't understand it, it makes it all the more dangerous, right? Because if it's too good to be true, but you understand the system and you understand the industry and you understand like the terminology and you're familiar enough and you can be like, oh, this seems abnormal and too good to be true, but at least I know the right questions to ask and I know where to look and I can decipher the language and I can really understand and pick things apart. Like, it's different if something feels too good to be true, but you have an understanding of the topic, because then you know how to analyze the topic. But if it's too good to be true and you have no idea what you're doing, just stay away. Just stay away. It's safer, it's easier, and in the long term, it's probably going to be a lot less risky. I mean, maybe you miss out on something, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just save yourself a lot of hurt long term. So yeah, that's what my logic was. And so taking this back to the podcast, when I was pre-recording the episode, the ending, I was saying something like, leave us a 5-star rating. And if you're also on YouTube, blah, 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 blah. So I had to cut out the leave us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you're using. So the ending got a little bit chopped up and it was a whole debacle. I tried to, camouflage it with some ums and ahs, but not always successful. So apologies for that. But hopefully that won't be an issue moving forward. So that's that on that in terms of podcast distribution. So you will only my God, I can't speak. Sorry, guys. It's hard to have a podcast when your mouth just decides to not work. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. So for the time being, the only place where you'll be able to listen to Occasionally Insightful is on YouTube. In the long term, that might change. But I would say for the next few months, this is how things are going to be. So hopefully that's okay. And if you have experience hosting a podcast and you can recommend a site for me to use and it's like a genuinely non-biased, unsponsored opinion, then do let me know. Do hit me up either on Twitter at pod_insightful or just send me an email to occasionallyinsightfulpodcast@gmail.com. And any advice will be much appreciated. So let's finally, 20 something minutes in? 30 minutes in. Wow. Let's finally move on to something a little bit more exciting. And I wanted to update you on the kitten situation. So a couple of episodes ago, if you remember, I talked about a couple of my cats giving birth to kittens. Well, I finally seen the kittens. I can't confirm how many kittens there are because they don't let me get close enough, but I would say at least 4 or 5. They're all very cute. They're all very small. They are all would fit very comfortably into the palm of my hand. They are adorable. But yesterday, we had to mount a rescue operation. And by we, I mean my siblings and I. Because one of the kittens had fallen into the drain. Basically, we have a storm drain thingy in our back garden. And the grate that covers it, the gaps between the bars are pretty big. Well, they're not pretty big, but if you're a tiny kitten, they are pretty big. It's big enough for a kitten to fall through. So somehow a kitten fell through in there and it was meowing up a storm for the whole day. And it's only when my brother went down to investigate that he realized that, there's a kitten trapped in there. So we removed the grate and he climbed into the drain and pulled the kitten out. And now the kitten is reunited with their mum. I'm not sure whose kitten it is. It's one of their kittens. Because I say that because if you remember, there were 2 cats who gave birth. So I don't know whose kitten it is, but it was one of their kittens. And peace has been restored. There is no more frantic, not aggressive, but sort of distressed meowing happening in the background. So that was a happy, slightly dramatic event that happened yesterday. I would also say because the 2 of them have given birth at about the same time, they seem to be sort of co-parenting. So I think it's just everyone's kitten is everyone's kitten. And so they kind of sit. So Pepper, who's so it's Pepper and Brownie who've had kittens. So Pepper lies down on one side of the kitten pile and Brownie lies on the other side of the kitten pile, and together in between them they kind of keep the kittens together in one place. And so kittens pile on top of each other to stay warm. And so you also the kittens just nurse from whoever they happen to be closest to. So I think parenting is schmarenting. Everyone's kitten is everyone's kitten. So it's kind of a co-parenting situation, which is really cool to see. I think this is Pepper's first batch of kittens. This is Brownie's, I don't know, 8th, 9th, who knows? She's had a lot of kittens, guys. She's had a lot of kittens. Kittens are so far doing pretty well. They seem to be alive. They're a few weeks old. Not much to report other than that. Who else is in this pod? I will keep you updated in future if any developments occur. On the topic of my life and developments that have occurred, you may or may not remember that, was it last episode? Was it the episode before? Either way, one of the more recent episodes, I was talking about wanting to go vegan. And I was talking about it with the intent that it would be something that I would slowly work towards. Well, I was talking to my sister last week, and told her that, yeah, I want to go vegan. And in fact, I said to her, like, would you go vegan with me? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. So we are now vegan / transitioning into veganism. And let me explain. So she is very like, we are vegan now. So she is very like, we are vegan now, in the sense of, what I mean by transitioning into veganism is, we obviously have groceries and food products in the house that aren't vegan. We have some cheese, we have cream cheese, we have cookies and other bits and bobs that are not vegan, but we don't want the food to go to waste. So we're gonna finish things that we have in the house, but we are not gonna continue buying, or my sister and I, kind of my brother, are not gonna buy like cow's milk and eggs and butter, and instead buy suitable plant-based alternatives. My brother is joining, but he's definitely cutting out meat, but he's not, I think, as committed as my sister and I are on the whole veganism thing. But he does support us and he does want to join in. My parents aren't super joining. I mean, my mom is going quote unquote chickentarian. So she's going to cut out all meat and cow products. So she's still going to cut out cow's milk and butter, but she's going to keep on eating chicken and eggs. I think that's the plan. I'm not sure. Yeah, but as far as me and my sister goes, that wasn't English. As far as my sister and I are concerned, like, we are, like, I still wouldn't say that I'm fully vegan, because like I said, I'm in this transitioning phase of clearing out things in the house that just need to be eaten. But I am going vegan officially. It's not just like intent. This is happening. So it's exciting. We have already been able to try out a few vegan plant-based recipes. A couple of days ago, we made mushroom meatballs, which actually turned out quite good. I did the thing of stitching together a few different recipes from Pinterest. And I realized, when we were tasting it, when we were breaking fast, I realized why that's not always the best idea. They tasted good. They tasted actually very good, considering the fact that I wasn't able to taste because I was fasting when I was making them. So like, I couldn't taste the mixture and I couldn't see if it needed more seasoning. So it was a little bit under seasoned, but it still tasted pretty decent. And the sauce that I made to go with it, like the tomato sauce that I made to go with it, was pretty on point. I was pleased. But the foundational recipe that I was editing and sort of building off of required you to basically blend the mushrooms with rice. And it was only when I was tasting the meatballs at the end, after I cooked them all, I was like, I now understand why the rice is necessary, because it provides the texture. I was too lazy to cook rice, so I was like, never mind, I'll sub the rice out for oats and a little bit extra flour and breadcrumbs. But then I realized the rice adds that chew that more closely mimics the texture of actual meatballs. So, you know, you learn something new every time you try out a new recipe and every time you cook. So that's what I learned. And I will say that despite the slight textural issue, it was still pretty successful. I would say we were probably 80% of the way. Taste was maybe 90%, but in terms of a dish as a whole, I would say like 80%. So I was quite happy with myself. We also made bread rolls. Sometimes the way I speak amuses myself. Like, I take pauses in the weirdest places because I want to say one thing, but then halfway through I realize that actually I want to say another thing. So I ended up taking pauses where I shouldn't be taking pauses. Anyway, we also made bread rolls, and they turned out very nice. Again, could have used a bit more seasoning and some extra salt in the dough would have benefited, or some extra herbs in the dough would have done us some good. But you know, they were fluffy. They went well with the meatballs. We were basically making meatball subs from scratch. I was happy. Aside from meatballs, I also cooked my siblings tofu. It's not the first time that I've had tofu in my life, and it's not the first time that I've cooked with tofu. I used to cook with it when I was at university, but it's the first time that I've cooked it at home for my siblings. And again, it turned out quite successful. Apart from the fact that, okay, so you're supposed to like squeeze the tofu before you cook it and let it drain for like an hour so that the excess moisture can drain out. Well, I might have squashed it a bit too much because I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to squash it. So I'm going to put a cutting board, and then I'm going to put our pestle and mortar. Yeah, our pestle and mortar is like this hunk of stone. It's like a hunk of granite or something. And so I put the pestle and mortar on top of the cutting board. When I came back 10 minutes later, the poor tofu was just flat. It was just a pancake. I was like, oh, okay, squash, but not that much squashing. I see. Okay, I know. So I mean, it still tasted fine. I covered it in some herbs and spices and a little bit of oil, and I put it in the air fryer, and it still tasted really good. But it was flat. It was a bit flat. I probably also should have cooked. So I only cooked one packet of tofu, and if you've seen tofu packets, I mean, it's not a lot in there, so I probably should have cooked two. But again, this is my first time, guys. This is my first time, so I'm still figuring things out, okay? Go easy on me. But again, the taste was pretty decent. I was quite pleased. Oh, also that same night, I made sweet potato fries. And like, guys, as far as experiments go, it was pretty successful. This past weekend was a weekend of cooking experimentation. I mean, a lot of my weekends involve cooking experimentation, but it's especially hard to do cooking experimentation when you're fasting and you can't taste. So you don't know if the experiment is going in the right direction or if you're just vastly, grossly under seasoning everything. But anyway, sweet potato fries, successful. Probably need to tweak the method a little bit more. But in general, I mean, they came out pretty crispy. So yeah, sweet potato fries. Okay, homemade fries in general are a little bit tricky because you want the crunch. I mean, I want the crunch. I want the crunch, but I don't want the potato to be undercooked. Like, I want the fluffy, but I want the crunchy. So, I mean, normal potato fries in general are a little bit tricky, but sweet potato fries add another layer of complication because sweet potatoes in and of themselves have starch but don't have a lot of starch, and so they don't quite crisp up in the same way in the oil when you fry them. So the method that I used was this. I peel the potatoes and I chop them into roughly 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter fry shapes. I mean, they were misshapen because, you've seen a sweet potato, I hope. They're not You know, they're not like a perfect cuboid, so it's hard to cut them exactly 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, but you know, as far as I could, I cut them to the same dimensions, right? And then I soak them in a bit of water, and then I spike that water with vinegar and put in a lot of salt, and then I boiled them for maybe 10 minutes, a little bit over 10, just until they were softened but not fully cooked through. And then I drained them, I let them cool, and then I coated them in cornstarch, in a lot of cornstarch. So that is how you overcome the issue of sweet potatoes not crisping up properly in the fryer. So I don't know if you've ever had sweet potato fries in a restaurant, but you might have noticed that often there's like this crispy outer layer, but it doesn't, like, you can sort of tell that it's not the potato itself forming a crispy skin. Like when you eat fries at a restaurant, you can tell that there's the crispy skin and then there's the fluffy potato inside. But with sweet potato fries, it feels like the fries are coated in something. So when I was doing my research, I discovered that most restaurants, or a lot of restaurants, coat the sweet potato fries in cornstarch or some sort of corn, tapioca, potato starch, something like that, before frying so that they can develop that crispy outside. I was like, aha. So, I let the sweet potato fries fully drain. Then I coated them in cornstarch, and then I fried them, and I fried them for ages so that they got really, really crispy. And, you know, they came out good. They came out pretty crispy. They didn't stay crispy, but that's kind of to be expected. I think in future, a few things I would tweak is, number one, letting the potatoes soak in vinegar water for a bit longer, because that's supposed to help with something. I think that's supposed to help with starch retention, or it's supposed to help the potatoes fry up better. I think the boiling time was good. The boiling and then letting them cool method was good. I would coat them in cornstarch plus seasonings because, I mean, they got crispy, but they didn't really develop a lot of color. So I would coat them with cornstarch plus cayenne pepper plus paprika plus turmeric plus, you know, those kinds of spices. And then I would change up the frying method so that I fry them once at a slightly lower temperature to sort of finish cooking them through and to form skin, on the crispy skin on the outside. And then I would take them out, drain them, and then fry them again at a higher temperature so that they really crisp up and develop color. I think that is my plan going forward, because there was one batch of fries that I did where I had to do the double fry method, because I fried them first when my oil wasn't quite hot enough. And by the time I finished frying everything else, I look back and they were a bit sad and, a bit too orange, not enough brown, and a little bit floppy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to throw you back in for a couple more minutes. And when they came back out, they were a good consistency and texture. So I'm going to try the double fry method next time. But yeah, that was my adventure into making sweet potato fries. I was quite impressed with myself. Well, we can also talk about cooking failures, because I mean, not everything you do can be a success in the kitchen. So let me tell you about our attempt to make mushroom gravy. Guys, so what we did was we bought dried mushrooms. You've probably seen them, like, you know, it's just mushrooms that are dried up in a plastic bag, right? So we bought some dried mushrooms, and we took them home, and I put them in the air fryer for 5 minutes or so, because when they were dried mushrooms, but I could still feel that they were squishy. So I put them in the air fryer to really, really crispen up. They weren't burnt, but they were just slightly more toasted and a little bit browner, and a little bit more dehydrated, which is what I wanted. So I then put the air-fried dried mushrooms into the blender, and we blended it to turn into a mushroom powder. To that mushroom powder, and by we, I mean my sister and I, we added some cornstarch and some salt, And that was our mushroom gravy powder. Let me tell you, it did not turn into mushroom gravy. So the reason why we made this quote unquote mushroom gravy powder was because when we make chicken gravy, we just use chicken gravy that comes from a packet, right? So, which is basically chicken seasoning, chicken flavoring, plus some sort of thickening agent, usually cornstarch. And then you just add water to the powder, heat that water powder mixture over a stove until it comes together and until it thickens to the consistency that you want it to be at. Right? So I was like, okay, following the same logic, mushroom powder plus a thickening agent like cornstarch plus water with a little bit of salt equals mushroom gravy. No. No. That logic doesn't hold. Yeah, it like my kitchen, we experiment a lot in the kitchen. And we've had I don't want to say failures, but sort of we've missed the mark a couple of times, as in we haven't quite been as successful as we'd hoped. But I would say that this mushroom gravy debacle was the first time where we truly made something completely inedible. Like it was not good, guys. It was just cornstarch, basically. Like there was no mushroom taste whatsoever. It was just cornstarch. And we didn't even put that much. We put like for like a whole cup, maybe like for a whole half a cup of mushroom powder, we put maybe a tablespoon of cornstarch. And still, no mushroom flavor, just solidified cornstarch. It was it was a little bit traumatizing. I'm honest. So it was just bleh. I tasted it, and the texture alone in your mouth is just bleh. No. No. Yeah. Clearly, we need to figure out another way to make mushroom gravy, because that is not it. But we'll keep experimenting. And if I do come up with a better method, I will be sure to let you guys know. On the flip side, if anybody else knows how to make a decent mushroom gravy, and it doesn't take much effort and it actually tastes good, do let me know. Send the email to me. Send the recipe to me via email, please. I will be forever grateful. But yeah, so that's been our adventures into veganism. We have also, wandered into and started exploring the vegan plant-based meat section of the grocery store. So we bought some Beyond Meat burgers, which I'm excited to use at some point. We bought some plant-based burritos, plant-based chicken fajita burritos. I mean, they tasted okay, but probably wouldn't repurchase. And we also, or rather my mom also bought plant-based sausage patties. Now here's a question that I would like to know the answer to. Why? Okay, so I'm talking about the McDonald's like Egg McMuffin sausage type sausage. Like, they call it a sausage, but it's basically just a patty. Why is it called sausage when it's basically a patty? I mean, I'm guessing it's because they took the sausage mixture and flattened it out so that it becomes a patty. I mean, it is, if you presented it in a different form factor, into a sort of tubular form factor. Are sausages tubes? No, they're not. But you know what I mean? Like if you presented it in our traditional cylindrical sausage, if you presented that same meat mixture into the traditional cylindrical sausage shape, try saying that fast. Cylindrical sausage shape. It would be sausage and nobody would bat an eye. But why, when we take that same meat mixture and flatten it out, we still call it sausage? It's sausage, just like what, who decided that was how things were going to be done? Like it's not smart, guys. It's not smart. Like we should call the flattened sausage something different. Or we should call the cylindrical sausage something different. But they shouldn't be the same because they are two different things. Form factor matters. Anyway, yeah, so last night we tried some sausage patties. They tasted good. Yeah, and I'm excited to continue experimenting with new vegan dishes and making stir fries, making noodle dishes, making more, pasta recipes, and trying out rice alternatives like the quinoa and couscous. And I'm excited to embark on this new journey. And my reasons for going vegan is mainly for the animals and for the environment. The concept of eating animals is okay. In the sense of and here I'm talking from a Islamic religious perspective, right? Allah only makes haram or not permissible the things that are not good for you. So Allah did not make haram chicken and beef or milk and eggs, right? So those things must therefore be good for you in some way, or at least not bad for you, right? But so I have no problem accepting that it's okay to eat chicken and meat. But my issue is I'm not comfortable with the animal agriculture industry as it currently looks like in the world, with factory farming and just all the things that they have to do to the animals. I'm not comfortable with the way the animals are treated. So although the concept of eating meat is still something that I'm okay with now, it'll be interesting to see how my perspective of that changes with time. But, the concept itself of eating meat is fine to me, but the concept of raising meat to eat, raising cows, and the way that cows are being raised for slaughter, that is not okay with me. So yeah, it's I don't believe that animals' lives should have to suffer and be so, we shouldn't have to force them to live through such dismal, depressing, traumatic, painful experiences just so that they can be killed and we can eat them. I don't think that's right. And so I don't want to put any more animals through that cycle and through that system. And beyond that, I'm a geographer. And so you cannot ignore the impact that the animal agriculture industry has on the environment. And I know I keep saying that I want to do a full podcast episode just talking about this and, the food industry, the animal agriculture industry, and how messed up everything is. Now is not the time for me to fully get into it, but inshallah, one of these days I will sit down and I will properly plan an episode, because I think that it's a discussion that more people really need to have. Anyway, yeah, so it's also coming from an environmental sustainability perspective, because even if you talk about sort of pasture raised cows or chickens that were allowed to roam free, there's still not enough land. There is not enough land in the world that would allow us to raise all of our livestock in that pasture, cage-free way. And similarly, even if you practice ethical farming, even if you ethically raise chickens, the feed that you use, that feed has to come from somewhere. Those plants are taking up, the feed plants are taking up water, and they're taking up space that could be used for other purposes, other agricultural or it could be that land. There's an opportunity cost to growing feed for animals, right? That land has an opportunity cost. And it's also inefficient. you have to raise livestock, you have to produce the grains to produce the feed, and then that feed goes into the chickens. But like the conversion rate is not 1-to-1. It's like, maybe 50 tons of feed for one cow. I mean, that's not the exact number, but it's something like, the proportions are way off. So yeah, it's not the most efficient way to nourish yourself. So for animal reasons and for environmental reasons, I am going vegan. Health reasons, I mean, they kind of play into it, but it's more in the sense of going vegan will force me to, or it's a good excuse to not eat the things that I tend to eat that aren't good for me. So like cheesecake. I can't eat cheesecake anymore because it has cheese in it. But whereas if I were to just go on a diet and not eat cheesecake because it makes me fat or whatever, that would be harder for me to stick to in my head, because I'm like, well, I mean, just one time, and it's easier to sort of find a workaround around it and justify to yourself why you deserve that slice of cheesecake. But if I am not allowing myself to have a slice of cheesecake because I am now vegan and because we care about the cows, like, it's harder for me to justify eating that slice. So, it's gonna be probably a little bit healthier for me long term, because I'm not eating the sort of guilty pleasure treats that I usually would be. I mean, don't get me wrong, I will still find a way to get in my snackage and satisfy my dessert cravings. But I'm probably going to figure out a way to make like tofu cheesecake, which I'm very interested in trying out. I've seen a lot of recipes on Pinterest, and I want to see if they actually turn out good. I mean, it looks promising, but I think it will, again, require some finessing. Again, I will update you on any exciting developments that happen on that front. But yeah, that's experience into veganism thus far. My sister is, like I said, quite on board with me. She's actually a little bit more, I wouldn't say enthusiastic, but she's more just, she is not eating any animal-based products at all. So like we still have some cheese and some cream cheese in the fridge. So I am the person in charge of finishing that up, it seems, because she's not going to have any more cream cheese on toast or whatever. So, that's good for her. I am just doing my duty to making sure that we don't waste any food, because food waste is another problem. But yeah, we're not planning on buying any more animal products, or at least my sister and I aren't. So this is an exciting time of my life. And I look forward to seeing what other recipes we try. We will have to sort of adapt a lot of our sort of family classics, our lasagna, our pasta bake, our chicken tenders, but I think that the subs that we can do, like tofu tenders or breaded tofu, I think that would taste pretty good. And yeah, I'm excited to live a little bit more sustainably, honestly. So, if anybody has any advice or recipes they want to share, or you have your own experience of becoming vegetarian or becoming vegan and you want to share with me your stories, well, please feel free to leave a comment or to hit me up on Twitter or to send me an email. I would love to hear what everyone else has gone through. I think that we could all stand to be more conscious consumers and more ethical consumers and more aware of what we're consuming and what the impact of our consumption has on the world, whether it's foodstuffs, whether it's clothes, whether it's electronics, like everything that we buy and eat or use in our day-to-day life everything has an impact. And while our individual level impacts are nowhere anywhere close to the impact that large corporations have on the environment, I still think that you can, it's not an either or thing. Like, yes, the getting corporations to be more sustainable in their practices would have a much bigger impact on the global environment than our individual level contributions. But it's not an either or thing. Like, we have to put pressure on corporations, and we also have to ourselves live more sustainably. Suddenly I can't say that word. Sustainably. So yeah, I would encourage you to have a think and just educate yourself. I think that just educating yourself, watching a few videos on YouTube, watching a few videos on TikTok. Okay. We are sort of over the 1 hour mark at this point, and I don't want to drag this on for too long. I was going to talk about my experiences with TikTok in this episode, because TikTok has been a new thing that I've discovered or gotten into recently, but maybe we'll save that for next time. But going back to my original point, I think that we could all just stand to be a little bit more aware and a little bit more conscious of the impact that we are having on the environment. I'm not saying that we should all become eco-justice warriors, but just being more conscious of what you consume and what you use is important. And this is not saying, ultimately, yes. It's a fine balance, because ultimately we all need to, if we want to have a world to live in, we all need to very drastically change our lifestyles, which is to say we all need to basically cut out the consumption of animal products and, stop buying into fast fashion and, lots of things. At the end of the day, drastic change is what is needed. But I think for me, I found that it's been a bit of a snowball effect, in the sense of you have this sense of inertia at the beginning and you don't want to change because you're comfortable with things as the way they are. You're comfortable with life as you live it. But you make a couple of changes here and there. Like, you say, okay, I'm going to carry my own straws around. Or you say that I'm going to bring my own cup when I go to Starbucks so that they don't have to keep on giving me plastic cups. You make a couple of small changes, and then you start educating yourself more, and you realize, okay, this is a bigger issue than I realized or than I thought it was. So I'm going to make these other changes. And then slowly you make more and more and more changes until you get to a point where you're like, now I can start making these big changes. Now I can commit to living zero waste. Now I can commit to veganism. Now I can commit to whatever the case may be. Now I can commit to, having my own garden in the backyard, which is kind of something that I also want to do. So it's this snowball effect of, starting small and, doing the things that are most convenient for you, that don't require such a huge change to your lifestyle, but would still benefit the planet. And then over time, as you expose yourself to more information about the state of the world and the level of change that is needed to protect the planet and to protect our own health and well-being, then things start to snowball. Or at least that's how it's been for me. Maybe it's different for other people, but I think that's been the case for me. So, just implement change where you can implement change. So that was today's episode. That's all we have time for. I hope that it's been interesting. Again, it's been a bit of a all over the place, slightly disconnected episode, but maybe maybe you found things interesting. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed yourself. As always, if you've got any topic suggestions, any comments, questions, or concerns, why don't you send me an email to occasionalyinsightfulpodcast@gmail.com. I almost forgot my email address there. Occasionalyinsightfulpodcast@gmail.com. Occasionally is spelled with 2 C's, 1 S, and 2 L's. You can also hit me up on Twitter. It's @pod_insightful. And perhaps you could consider giving this video a like and maybe hitting that subscribe button and hitting that bell. Maybe even leaving a comment. I'm not going to force you, but it would be much appreciated. Yeah, so thank you all so much for tuning in. And until next time, take care, everyone.